Joining us in the room today and online around the world. My name is Maher Nasser. I'm the Director of the Outreach Division in the Department of Global Communications, and I welcome you to this town hall. It is my pleasure to moderate this town hall with His Excellency the Ambassador Dennis Francis, the President of the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly. I also wish to welcome with us here on the podium His Excellency Ambassador Colin Kilapile, who is the Chef de Cabinet of the Office of the President of the General Assembly, and also Her Excellency Keisha Maguire, Special Envoy and a Special Advisor on Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment to the President. As has now become a tradition, today's town hall is an opportunity for civil society representatives here in the room, but also around the world, to hear directly from His Excellency, the President of the 78th General Assembly, about his priorities and to engage with him and his esteemed colleagues directly. Over the past 3 years, we have lived through a global pandemic, worsening climate crisis, continued environmental degradation, rising geopolitical tensions, conflicts with global implications, rising inequalities, threats of new technologies, and more. Global problems require global solutions, and the United Nations is at the center of multilateralism, with the General Assembly at its core as the most representative body in the world. The global and pervasive nature of these challenges need all hands on deck, from governments at all levels, civil society, international organizations, academia, and the private sector. We need more engagement and opportunities to tap into all resources humanity can muster to achieve the objective of a world in which everyone can thrive in peace, dignity, equality, and justice on a healthy planet. We're deeply grateful for your tireless work on the ground as civil society representatives. And on behalf of the Department of Global Communications, I also thank you for joining our advocacy efforts to promote the Sustainable Development Goals, to take climate action, to accelerate progress towards gender equality, and to tackle hate speech and to combat misinformation and disinformation. Your Excellency President Francis, your vision highlights the importance of enhanced multilateralism to pursue the vital objectives of peace, prosperity, and progress, and sustainability for all, and your commitment to meaningful, open, inclusive, and transparent participation of all stakeholders, including civil society, is clear. The Ask PGA platform on your website demonstrates your commitment to engaging with the public and allowing them to pose important questions that contribute to the organization's work and well-being of global citizens. As the 78th session progresses, we acknowledge the importance of member states, along with civil society, continuing to engage in consultations on various topics and processes, including the preparation of the Summit of the Future. We particularly appreciated the call in your letter of 21 October for the Summit co-facilitators and co-chairs to ensure the meaningful participation of all relevant stakeholders is a further testament to your dedication to inclusion and collaboration. The UN Department of Global Communications is happy to announce the planning for the 2024 UN Civil Society Conference that will be held in May in Nairobi in advance of the summit, and we will devote the hour after this to that subject. So please stay with us if you can. Before I present His Excellency, I would like to note that today's event is available in the 6 official languages of the United Nations. Interpretation booths are on both sides, so you can tune in to whichever language that you choose. In the room, you can listen with the earpiece that is on your seats, and you will find the choice of language on the desk itself. For those of you watching online, you can select the language you want to hear at the drop-down menu on your screen. And for those of you who are posting on social media, we encourage you to follow us on Twitter at UNDGC_CSO and at UN_PGA. And please use the hashtag UN with civil society in your posts. And now it is my honor to present His Excellency Mr. Dennis Francis, who has had a distinguished career spanning approximately 40 years in the diplomatic service of Trinidad and Tobago. Ambassador Francis served as his country's longest-serving ambassador for 18 years and has held various high-ranking positions, including permanent representative to the UN in Geneva, the World Trade Organization, and the UN Human Rights Council. He was also accredited to various UN specialized agencies in Vienna and Rome, and served as ambassador to Austria and Italy. Ambassador Francis has also served as chairman of the Committee on Trade-Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights and the Commonwealth Group of Developing Countries, and in 2006, he was assigned to Geneva following a 7-year tour as High Commissioner of Trinidad and Tobago to Jamaica and permanent representative to the International Seabed Authority. His diplomatic contributions extended to UNESCO, where he completed a 3-year assignment as chair of the Trinidad and Tobago National Commission in 2021. Once again, we're very delighted to have the President of the 78th session of the UN General Assembly, His Excellency Ambassador Francis, with us today and to share his vision and priorities. We will first hear his remarks, and then we will open the floor to questions and interactions, and we look forward to a dynamic discussion. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nasser. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good morning. Thank you for your participation at our first town hall with civil society organizations this morning. Before I begin, allow me to thank the Department of Global Communications for their partnership in organizing this event, and Mr. Maher Nasser for moderating it. And let me also thank those joining us online. I'm very eager to hear your questions and to engage with you. When I assumed the presidency of the General Assembly in September, I outlined a series of steps and initiatives to rebuild trust in the multilateral system and to reignite global solidarity. This stemmed from the fact that, amid ever-worsening global challenges, our nation, and indeed our peoples, seem to be drifting further apart. We are seeing more pervasive signs of fraction and disunity, of discord and disharmony. This is hampering our ability to address climate change. It is diminishing our efforts to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals, and it is impacting our confidence in our ability, though not in our resolve, to live up to confront, and to try to solve the conflicts, violence, and grave violations of human rights that we are witnessing. As President of the General Assembly, the world's preeminent intergovernmental forum for dialogue and deliberation, it is my responsibility to serve as a convener and to bring together all peoples, all sectors, and all stakeholders to drive forward solutions to our shared challenges. That includes, of course, working with you, our vital civil society partners. Because the reality is that member states alone cannot resolve the challenges we face. We need the voices and the contributions of civil society. We need that of the private sector. We need that of academia and the youth. We need everyone. I repeat, everyone. With the principles of unity and solidarity as my guideline, I have instructed my team to pursue the 78th session that engages in open, inclusive, and transparent consultations with all relevant stakeholders when planning our activities. And to uphold this pledge, we are taking the necessary actions. We have designated 2 civil society focal points at my office. We have launched an open Ask PGA platform on our website to better engage with the general public. And I have committed that during my official visits, I engage with local stakeholders and grassroots organizations, including institutions of learning and civil society representatives, where it is feasible to do so. Today, I am glad that we are here, and I truly hope that this is just the beginning. Because we want to do more, I hope that you will offer suggestions for the remainder of the session and help us look at further ways to enrich the process and indeed the content of ongoing intergovernmental processes by incorporating the enormous experience and perspectives of civil society. On that note, and as we look ahead to the remainder of the 78th session, there are multiple opportunities for civil society engagement and participation. First, a major task for this session are the preparations for the Summit of the Future in September 2024. This includes negotiations for the summit outcome, the so-called Pact of the Future, to be accompanied by a declaration on future generations and a global digital compact, if agreed by the member states. While member states remain the decision makers, the voices of civil society are indispensable, and I have therefore requested the co-facilitators to ensure that all relevant stakeholders are meaningfully engaged to ensure inclusive outcomes. On this point, I'm delighted to note that the co-facilitators will hold a virtual consultation tomorrow with stakeholders and civil society representatives. I encourage you to participate in this consultation, as well as send any written inputs on your views and expectations of the summit, as well as suggestions for the outcome document, the Pact of the Future. Beyond the summit, I invite you to join us in preparing for a new flagship initiative of my presidency, the Sustainability Week, which I will organize in April here at the United Nations headquarters. As I announced at COP28, this signature initiative of my presidency will include events covering sustainability in transport, tourism, infrastructure, and energy, and a significant event on debt sustainability. Details for registration and participation for each of the events will soon be available on our OPGA website. Colleagues, dear friends, I will stop here because, of course, the purpose of today's discussion is to hear from you and to engage with you. While looking forward to our interaction, let me indicate in advance that I have received a significant number of questions, which I very much welcome as a sign of the extent of your interest to engage. In view of the limited time we have this morning, please feel free to utilize our Ask PGA platform should you require follow-up responses after this town hall. On that note,
Thank you, Your Excellency, for these thought-provoking and inspiring words and for your bold vision. Before we open the floor to the audience in the room, and because you have the advantage of being in the room, we wanted to give those who are not in the room to have the first set of questions. So we have received questions from a call out to civil society from representatives from other parts of the world or people who couldn't be with us today. I'll start with the first question from John Ede from Nigeria, a representative of the Ohaha Family Foundation. His question is, civil society is critical to hold the UN to account. How are you working to ensure that the civil society organizations' representatives are in the leadership and on the decision-making table in the preparation for the Summit of the Future?
The Summit of the Future. The Summit of the Future is, at its core, designed to comprehensively address pressing issues affecting both people and the planet with a forward-looking perspective. Accordingly, it goes without saying that it is extremely important, in fact critical, that the very people whom this process is intended to serve should have a say and should be involved, actively involved, in shaping the outcome of this initiative. So we absolutely need the voices, the perspectives, the experience, the contributions of civil society and of all other stakeholders, because this process, this Summit of the Future, will involve every dimension of society. It will involve education. It will involve technology, the proper and effective use of technology, in a way that does not undermine the stability of society. It will involve, for example, questions of governance, of multilateral institutions, important institutions whose decisions and programs directly impact the daily lives of people everywhere on the planet. And so, it really is a no-brainer that you can't be discussing people's future without engaging with the people themselves. Legitimacy alone requires that that input is actively sought, and not just sought, it is sought and, as is practicable, incorporated into the final product. So it is therefore up to us as member states to create the proper inclusive spaces and mechanisms to harvest your input. And to that end, in my letter of appointment in October, I called upon the co-facilitators to ensure a broad, open, consultative process involving all stakeholders in order to ensure that there is full representation, as far as practicable, in shaping the summit process. Now, let's be clear. The process is an intergovernmental process driven by member states. It is member states who will have to commit to the outcome document. But that commitment that will be given will have to reflect and be an accurate reflection of the inputs and contributions that they have received from a broad cross-section of stakeholders. So it's very important for you as civil society to be engaged, fully engaged, and I hope that you will participate in tomorrow's meeting being organized by the co-facilitators and make those inputs because this process is a process that is infused from the bottom and moves up. And so you need to get in early to make those contributions in order to ensure that your views and your experience that you alone have, there's no replacement for it really, because you come at these issues with a somewhat different perspective than governments do. Your experience is the experience of being on the ground, interacting directly with the people who are impacted. You know what works and what does not work, and why, and where the pitfalls are. So that experience, that broad experience that you've amassed over that type of engagement, years on, for several years, is going to be very beneficial to the process of shaping what the outcome of the summit of the future is. Because, yes, it is ambitious, but it also has to be practical. It has to be achievable. For it to have meaning and depth in shaping people's lives, it must be implementable. It is the only way. And you have that experience. You can bring that forcefully and authoritatively to the table. And that is my ask of you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and I think you heard it well. Engagement does not start here at the UN. Engagement starts with the governments directly. So we'll take now several questions from the floor, and I think we will then have the PGA answer them in one go. I know I'm aware of the time. We'll start maybe with the, let's see some hands. We'll start with one here, the two ladies in the middle. 3 questions, and then we'll turn to Your Excellency. Wait for it to go red, and then you can speak.
Your Excellency, my name is Abel Tekla, representing Baito Yakul USA, a grassroots organization of Eritrean Americans comprised of chapters in over 25 cities across the United States, in conjunction with Global Yakul, who operate out of 11 countries globally. Our key purpose is advocating for democracy and rule of law in Eritrea. My questions are 2 of the following. Since 2015, the EU has provided Libya with a huge financial aid package of over 455 million euros to prevent mass migration from Africa. Many of the African refugees in Libya are Eritreans. For a number of reasons, the policy has caused an enormous human trafficking crisis in Libya that's uncontrollable and has resulted in the victimization of Eritreans and other African refugees, including torture, sexual gender-based violence, financial extortion, and/or death. We know that addressing the root cause of migration is a key solution to the crisis, namely the forging of a government that upholds and protects human rights in Eritrea. However, in the immediate term, how can the UN collaborate with diaspora and host country civil society to address the scourge of human trafficking in Libya and across Northeast Africa more broadly? And then one more question, if that's okay.
I'm afraid not. We
Understood.
have to move on. Thank you. I mean, I call on everyone to please be precise and articulate in your questions so that we allow the largest number of questions possible.
Your Excellency, I'm here representing Democracy Without Borders. My name is Rita Kakati Shah. With a view of the Summit of the Future, a civil society coalition called We the Peoples has proposed a UN civil society envoy, a UN World Citizens Initiative, and a UN Parliamentary Assembly to improve the UN's inclusiveness. Have you taken note of these proposals, and are you considering them?
Good morning. I'm Jessalina Rana, representing Civicus. I extend my gratitude to Your Excellency for convening this crucial gathering as you set the stage for your priorities on civil society engagement at the UN. Today, I present 5 imperative recommendations from the Unmute Civil Society Initiative backed by 52 states and over 300 civil society organizations. Firstly, we call for the UN to embrace digital tools for global engagement, widening access to UN policy spaces through technology and ensuring global participation of civil society organizations. Secondly, the UN must invest in digital infrastructure, addressing the disparities between the global north and south with a keen awareness of gender, rural-urban gaps, and economic inequalities. Thirdly, prioritizing meaningful participation is paramount, as you mentioned. UN procedures should be amended to grant civil society representatives ample time and opportunity to contribute, attend key meetings, and engage as equal stakeholders in critical negotiations. Our fourth recommendation is to celebrate civil society engagement through a Civil Society Action Day, a powerful symbol acknowledging the value of civil society participation, reaffirming the UN's commitment, and fostering constructive discussions for improvement. Lastly, we urgently call on to appoint the UN Civil Society Envoy. This envoy will champion best practices, address disparities, and actively enhance outreach to citizens and civil society groups worldwide. Implementing these recommendations systematically rather than in an ad hoc manner will contribute to forging a more inclusive and people-centered United Nations. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Since that wasn't a question, maybe I'll throw in a question from the online ones. This is a question from David Woolcombe from the UK, a representative of Peace Child International. How do you intend to ensure that the general public of the world know and care about the outcomes of the Global Summit of the future? So, Your Excellency.
Thank you. You raise a question of migration from Northern Africa vis-à-vis the European Union. Now, let me preface my remarks by making it quite clear that I am unable to speak on behalf of the European Union. The European Union is a member of the General Assembly of the United Nations, and they shape their policy on migration in accordance with their general philosophy and the political dynamics at play in Europe. So I will limit my response to the UN's approach regarding migration. And as you know, there is an organization called the International Organization of Migration, headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland, that addresses issues related to migration and to promote and encourage governments to adopt what they refer to as an orderly approach to migration. Because the thrust of the policy of the IOM is that migration need not be a drag on any economy or society if it is managed in a sensible, orderly manner. Now, there are push factors and pull factors always at play in migration. That is the reality. A number of these factors on both sides. People migrate for different reasons. Sometimes it's internal conflict. Increasingly, we are seeing migration taking place as a consequence of climate change, and in particular, sea level rise. People migrate because the land on which they grew up and lived for hundreds of years is no longer productive. And so they need to relocate to make a better life for themselves and their children. In 2019, the UN agreed a global compact on migration. The fact of the matter is, migration is as much a business, a global business, as it is an attempt by people to find a better life or to find safety in a new environment. And it is a huge business that elevates profits and income over the welfare and well-being of people. This is not something that the UN supports or encourages. In fact, quite the opposite. And so all governments need to be very alert to the dynamics and the potential for migration within their jurisdictions, because several human rights and humanitarian law provisions are being broken and violated by these traders, I suppose you can call them, and that imperils the lives and safety of individuals. Too often we have seen in the Mediterranean the sinking of ships carrying hundreds of desperate Africans to Europe, lives lost in a quest for safety or shelter at the hands of unscrupulous operatives whose only interest is themselves, not the people there. So I would advise that you continue your advocacy and to engage with, as much as you can, the relevant governments, civil society in those jurisdictions to ensure that the matter does not get lost, because people are being directly affected and this situation really needs to be brought under control. We at the UN, our voice is one of moral suasion. You know, we cannot, the UN does not have the authority to instruct a government. Governments are sovereign. They decide. What we can do and have done is to point out to governments the dangers, the risks involved in not complying with the relevant standards, global standards regarding migration, and the need, therefore, to become more sophisticated and more compliant with these standards in managing migration in a way that does not imperil the lives of human beings. There was a question about the implementation of 3 or 4 measures.
Civil society envoy.
Civil society, whether I'm aware of some recommendations and whether they are under consideration. To whom were these recommendations made? Can you say specifically?
These recommendations have been made a few different times, actually, at various civil society meetings, including in advance of the Summit of the Future. That's why we're pushing to find out if you're aware of them, and if you are, what's your stance on them?
Well, I must tell you, I am not aware of them. I'm not aware of them. Since I've sat as President of the General Assembly, no such proposal has crossed my desk. And therefore, it would be inappropriate for me now to respond to the second part of your question, which is whether they are under consideration. I can't consider something that I'm not aware of. They may well be worthy of consideration, but they've not reached me. And so you might consider sending them again, addressed to the President of the General Assembly. Let me say, so that we understand this clearly, that more will be involved in determining those issues than simply the opinion or view of the President of the General Assembly. That is how this organization works. And as the President of the Assembly, I am duty-bound to follow the established procedures and guidelines. But having said all of that, by all means, please submit them again, and we'll take a look.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We now go back to take some of the questions that came to us. The first question is from Diana Nicoya Stifana from Jonathan Jackson Foundation in Kenya. And the question is, how do you plan to enhance collaboration between UN General Assembly and youth grassroots organizations in addressing challenges faced by youth in developing regions, particularly in economic empowerment? And what specific steps will be taken to ensure diverse youth voices shape policies and initiatives? And if you don't mind, Your Excellency, we'll add another question from Ishan Shah, from civil society representative from the UN Women National Gender Youth Advocates in the UK. And the question is, how can the Office of the President of General Assembly support member states in ensuring meaningful youth engagement and gender equality are integrated throughout negotiations of the Pact of the Future and the preparatory process of the summit? And since most of these questions are focused on youth, we can take probably a youth, I saw you raise your hand, a question from the floor, and then we can turn it over to you.
Your Excellency, yeah, thank you. My question was directed exactly like that. I'm 22 years old, and we all know that my generation is going to experience the worst effects of the climate crisis. I'm happy that you are opening it up to as many people living in civil society, in addition to the shareholders. I hope that the Summit of the Future will include, and perhaps you could speak to this, a forum dedicated to youth engagement and listening to the concerns and also the solutions that young people have and have been implementing in their societies, in their communities, because it is going to be up to us to save our future in addition to the stakeholders and the governments at large.
Thank you, and you didn't introduce yourself.
I'm Luke Mullen. I'm an actor and environmental activist. I came to the last civil society conference in Salt Lake City about 4 years ago and was very happy to see a lot of young people my age there speaking, being engaged, and having their voices heard. And I hope that in the Summit of the Future, we can have even more engagement from young people, to have a direct line of communication between governments and young people.
Okay. Well, let's start here at the end. You're quite right. We're planning the future. We're scoping the future. It's your future, in a sense, more than it is the future of people in my generation. Interestingly, I was once the future. That's the dynamic thing about life and about these processes. As you go through life, your perspective your perspectives evolve, and you can find yourself on the opposite side of the table. But I was once the future, impatient, eager to change the world, to fix it, irritable when people would say to me, "Take your time, you have time." I never accepted it. You don't have time, you're living now. The problems often exist now, or you can see them. And so it's rightful and appropriate to have youth engagement, meaningful youth engagement. Excuse me. Maybe it's a youth calling me. One of the proposals in the Secretary General's common agenda is the establishment of a UN Youth Office to lead in advocacy with the youth. It's a very important step because that person becomes the focal point for matters related to the youth. In terms of the Summit of the Future process, you'd recall that I had mentioned before the emphasis that I had placed in writing to the co-facilitators to ensure the active involvement and participation of the youth in the process. And I have personally undertaken to ensure that when I travel officially on behalf of the General Assembly, I never lose the opportunity, as I did on Sunday in Doha, Qatar, to meet with the youth, to hear what their thoughts are and how they see the future. Because really, it sounds cliche, but young people should have an opportunity to contribute to how they see the world, to what kind of world we are seeking to build. And let's not forget that the Summit of the Future is also intended to turbocharge the SDGs. What kind of future? What kind of world? Is it the kind of world? Let me give you an example. During the height of the COVID pandemic, when there was mass global panic, because though a vaccine may have been in sight, it had not yet become available, widely available. But when it did, of course, governments sought to acquire those vaccines. I am personally aware of a number of governments in the Caribbean region who went to the market to purchase vaccines and who were told by the market, no, we cannot sell you these vaccines. Why? Your numbers are too small. We need to sell to countries that can purchase 50 million, 80 million, 100 million doses of the vaccine. But if you're Trinidad and Tobago with a population of 1.3 million, your numbers are too small. In other words, the market was rationing vaccines based on the market determination of who should have them and who should not. Is that the kind of world you want to shape in the 21st century? Where is the public interest in that? In a pandemic in which it was absolutely clear to everyone that any unvaccinated person constituted a threat to the rest of the society. How do you square that? Think about it for a minute. These are some of the questions. It's things like this. It's the intrusion of artificial intelligence into the privacy of people's lives, of shaping your patterns of demand in order to enhance profitability. Is that the type of world? So that's why we need these inputs, because we need your views as to the type of society. Society, it's not quite the same as economy. The type of society, the type of civilization, what will our values be? What is important to us? What does a successful, wholesome life mean? What are the components of that lifestyle? These are your decisions to a significant degree. In addition to which, I did mention earlier that I will be organizing in April of next year something called Sustainability Week that will address a number of issues, and certainly there's going to be an opportunity for a youth town hall regarding Sustainability Week. I hope and expect that you will engage fulsomely in that process. Regarding women's involvement, there was a question on women and girls' involvement. I believe you're more than familiar with my views on the fact that in 2023, we are still living in a situation where virtually half of the population is blocked out, prevented from participating in the from participating fully in the economic life and social life of the community through the ingrained discriminatory practices against women. In some places, as you know, women and girls are not permitted to go to school. And we know from our own lives and through the example of others that education is the great liberator. It shapes your values, your outlook. It broadens your horizons. It allows those who would have had absolutely no chance to rise in the social order and, in fact, to occupy places of influence and decision-making about the future of their societies. And why should we, at this juncture in the 21st century, be frustrating the ability and contribution of women to make decisions, important decisions, about the society? It's unacceptable. And it is for that reason that I've thought it appropriate to do certain things. I committed before assuming the presidency that the office of the PGA will be gender sensitive, and that as far as practicable, we would work to achieve gender parity. We have. In fact, we've gone beyond the parity because there are more women working in the office of the PGA than there are men. That's the first thing. The second thing is that, conscious of the need to infuse issues of gender into the mainstreaming of the work of the United Nations, I've decided to appoint a focal point in my office to do that in appointing a special envoy for gender equity and women's empowerment. That person is sitting with me on this podium. Ambassador Maguire, former permanent representative of Grenada to the United Nations. And we have already begun to liaise with third parties regarding advancing this work. Not only that, we've also relaunched recently a gender advisory body comprising mostly the heads of various departments within the UN, but also including some knowledgeable persons from beyond the UN, in order to assist us in developing and shaping an appropriate gender policy in order to address issues around gender. Because we are quite adamant that the UN must lead by example. It must have the moral authority if it is going to be asking third parties to adopt and implement progressive policies. You can't be talking about inclusion and you're including women and girls out. You have to include them in. And that is what we're seeking to do. And finally, I should let you know that I have taken on the responsibilities of becoming myself a gender champion, and to work to ensure the implementation of SDG 5 within these portals, but as before, as being really the gold standard for what is conceived in the SDGs as being the global standard that everyone, hopefully, will follow. So, women and youth are intrinsically parts of the work program and the priorities of this presidency. And I can give you my undertaking now that we are going full steam ahead on those issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I know we have exhausted the time that you have shared with us, and I understand also that two permanent representatives of Germany and Namibia have also are with us in the room so that we can start the next town hall meeting. I will maybe, because it wasn't mentioned, one of the representatives of the major groups, indigenous people, very brief question, please, because that's the only group that we haven't addressed, and I think it's important, and then we conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. My name is Roberto Mucara Borrero. I'm a cacique or chief of the Guainía Taino tribe, part of the Arawak peoples. And I'm here representing actually the major groups and other stakeholders coordination mechanism, which brings together 21 different constituencies and stakeholders. We just wanted to share that as the world faces multiple and intersecting crises, we're calling on leaders to be bold and ambitious in their commitment to bring about a thriving future on a healthy planet with inclusive societies living in peace, justice, and according to the rule of law. The fundamental rights of all peoples, including the right to a healthy environment, must be front and center in our common future. With this in mind, the MGOS would like to highlight the economic dimension of sustainable development and the need for sufficient resources. And from our perspective, financing priorities for development need to include an increase for development cooperation, multilateral debt relief architecture, support for intergovernmental processes towards development of tax framework, increased ambition for the reallocation of special drawing rights based on a need in support of SDG recovery. Taking all these into consideration, how do you see the financing agenda being enhanced by the Summit of the Future process, and how can this be integrated in the upcoming FFD discussions? Thank you.
I'd say very quickly, based on what I've heard, you clearly need to join the discussion that the co-facilitators will have on the Summit of the Americas, because some of the items you've identified will be addressed in that process, not the least of which is the governance of multilateral financial institutions and the need, the proposal that there should be a change in approach, a radical change in approach that would make development financing more accessible, meaning extended on better terms to developing countries. So I would urge you to join that discussion. With respect to indigenous peoples, I'm glad that you were able to take the floor, although the time is short. I would ask that, and this I think goes for all of you, if there are any remaining questions or comments, please communicate with us via the Ask PGA platform. I am very, very encouraged that it's being very actively used because it is our formula for outreach, an important formula we have for outreach and engagement to learn what is on people's minds, what are the issues they care about. With respect to financing for development and the Summit of the Future process, there is a close link. There is a very close link because, as I was saying, there is a proposal to reform the international financial system and to adopt a new index, the multi-dimensional vulnerability index, which will measure vulnerability as distinct from measuring per capita income, which is really a snapshot in time and masks a lot of fragility and vulnerability that exists. Those two processes are in a way mutually reinforcing because the Sustainable Development Goals cannot and will not advance significantly without the injection of the means of implementation. Those reforms will require funding, and the funding has to come from somewhere, particularly since most developing countries with very tight budgets do not have the flexibility internally to mobilize the funds to make those reforms. So we are looking at a situation where the SDGs are being imperiled for lack of the required funding necessary to undertake those reforms and to deliver an increased standard of living and welfare and well-being to people all over the world. It is unacceptable that in 2023, 860 million people are suffering from hunger. It's totally unacceptable in a world of such plenty. So I ask all of you, please, be in touch with us on the platform. Let us continue the conversation and be active and positive in your contributions to the Summit of the Future, because it is your future as much as it is our future. And we need your voices, we need your perspectives, but most of all, we need your commitment. We need your commitment to help us to do what is necessary to re-energize multilateralism. It has done a lot, multilateralism, to shape our world and to create successes in many of our lives. Now, it needs us. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and you can count on the Department of Global Communication to continue working with you and your team to facilitate future engagement. And I encourage you, like he encouraged you, the President, ask PGA, go to the platform if you have still more questions. Thank you. And for those of you, please stay with us for the next town hall.